So wonderful to have so many of you here. Thank you very much for joining. So on behalf of SLASSCOM, a warm welcome. SLASSCOM is the industry association for IT and BPM companies, and it has been one of the few bright spots as an industry in these very difficult and dark times, because the IT BPM industry continues to grow, has continued to grow throughout the pandemic, and continues to hire. So it's an industry that gives great hope for our economy. It earns precious foreign exchange and provides high-grade, highly paid employment for our youth. Now, our youth are our most precious commodity. You are our future of our country. And that is why we at SLASSCOM were very keen that we have to coincide with World Mental Health Day, that we have this webinar so that we can share some best practices, some thoughts that will hopefully inspire and which you can then take on to your friends, because we really believe that this is something that could save a life. Now, if you look at some of the very well-known figures like Michael Phelps, the Olympic champion, the world heavyweight champion, you look at leading tennis stars, and what all of them have in common is that they have experienced challenges with mental health. So it is not something uncommon. It is nothing to be ashamed of. We all need help, and it is something that we can talk about. So what we want to do today is to make it okay to talk about it. And we have Dr. Usha and we have Dimitri today. So let me introduce, start with Dimitri. He's an energetic motivator. He's passionate about helping others break through barriers to achieve their life goals. He's a gifted communicator with over 10 years of sales experience in both Sri Lanka and the US, including 2 Fortune 500 companies. An empathetic speaker with over 6 years experience in the hospitality trade in Sri Lanka. He operates as a certified trainer, coach, and a consultant. So man of many talents, but he's here today to share his experience on digital health and on the impact of social media on our mental well-being. We also have Dr. Usha Gunawardana, consultant psychiatrist. Dr. Usha worked for the health service as a consultant psychiatrist until 2005 when she retired. She was the president of SLC Psychiatrists from 2010 to 2012. She has also been advisor to the Sahania Information Center since 2018. So we are very grateful to Dimitri Pieries and Dr. Usha Gunawardana for contributing of their valuable time, their knowledge, so that we can all learn and hopefully save a life. Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to invite Dr. Dimitri Pieries to share his presentation. Thank you.
So, thank you so much for having me for that lovely introduction, Jehan. I'll just get right into the topic. Today's topic is mainly on mental health. I will be discussing the area of digital addiction. So yes. Hope this will be of interest to most of us who are listening. In regards to digital addiction, this is a term that has been thrown around quite a bit. We should first begin to accept that we live in a very digital world. We have a very online lifestyle of how we live, what we do. When it comes to our entertainment, everything is streaming. When it comes to Netflix, Amazon Prime, this is how we are engaging with our entertainment, even from YouTube. This is part of our entertainment services. When it comes to gaming, video gaming is something very common that most of us, many people, many young youth use for recreation and to unwind. Social media is not just a form of entertainment, but it's also how we connect to the rest of the world. It's how we stay connected to our friends and new friends, whether it's your neighbors, your school friends, or others abroad. Work is now very much online. Screen time is now, most of our screen time, other than entertainment, is our work. It's how we earn a living. It's very much part of our salary, our income. And those who are studying, schooling has become also very much virtual. The last 3 years, essentially, school was only virtual. So this is a huge shift to the online lifestyle. Along with that shift has come the intensity of screen time. This is a basic information. As of July 2021, we have over 4.48 billion social media users around the world. That's equating to almost 57% of the total global population. So the term digital addiction is a term that's commonly thrown around, but it's best to go to the essentials. So in the mental health field, the mental health professionals use something called the DSM-5. This DSM-5 is the Bible. It's the handbook of all psychiatrists and psychologists. And according to the DSM-5, the studies done on this digital area is mostly done in something called internet gaming. It's actually now called the term internet gaming disorder. If you're not into internet gaming, don't worry. The research done under the gaming section, which is virtual gaming, online gaming, they have found similarities for the social media user, the user who's on screen for work, on screen for studies, and on screen for entertainment purposes. So there's a lot of similarities they have found. So according to the DSM-5, according to the DSM-5, the digital addiction is a behavioral addiction, just like other addictions. However, this is the first of its kind that has been found to cause an addiction from a non-ingestible substance. So basically, most common terms of addiction you hear is from, from drugs, from alcohol, from cigarettes, even from food substances. But this is the first of its kind that is not an ingestible substance. It is a very unique addiction from a visual stimuli and a physical activity. So whether it's you're watching something on a screen and playing a game, or you're watching something on a screen and doing work, or watching something on screen on your phone and clicking on it, that is a visual stimuli and a physical activity. This is compulsive, repetitive. This is what they have found as part of the addiction. This is part of the process. And on a short term, it is an enjoyable, reward-based system. This taps into the brain's reward system. This is why it's enjoyable, because if it doesn't feel good, you won't be doing it. So this is part of the basic idea of how digital addiction is defined by the mental health professionals. So let's take a quick look at what happens in our brains when this is going on. So here what you have is the four hormones or neurotransmitters that are responsible for feeling good. People would call these the happy hormones, the happy chemicals in our brain. These are the things that make us feel good. I'm only going to focus on two of them, which is dopamine and serotonin, because dopamine and serotonin are the two chemicals that are most affected when we are digitally engaged, when we are engaging with the screen for a long duration of time. So let's take a little bit about dopamine. I'm sure everyone's heard of this. Dopamine, the best way to understand it is how you feel. So the feeling that you get from dopamine is your energy. You have more energy, you have a sense of excitement, you have a sense of motivation of what you're doing. People call dopamine the reward hormone, but actually it's the promise of a reward. See, when you're doing something, the reason you keep doing it is you feel that you're going to get a reward at the end. So dopamine is the promise of a reward. That's the way I would like to phrase it. And dopamine is very important. There's nothing bad about it. It's essential for us. Dopamine is responsible for reinforcing positive behavior. Dopamine is what's responsible for motivating us to do work, whether it's to doing mathematics or to playing a basketball game, going for a swim, or enjoying conversations with your friends over a cup of coffee. Dopamine is what makes you feel good about doing those activities. Now let's look at serotonin. So again, let's look at the feelings to understand how this hormone works. Serotonin is responsible for balancing your mood. It's responsible for keeping things calm, keeping things peaceful. A better way to understand serotonin is that's the hormone that's responsible for making you feel satisfied, making you feel content. That's what makes you feel good after you have a heavy meal. The reason you stop eating is at some point serotonin kicks in and says, you know what, that's enough. After you've gone for a swim, gone for a jog, even chatting with your friends, at some point you're going to feel, that was really nice. I think it's time to now stop. That's serotonin at work. So it's very essential for balancing your internal system. And like I already said, it's needed for balancing your appetite, regulating sleep, reducing stress, reducing aggression, and coping with frustrations. So that's how serotonin works. Now, what does this have to do with digital addiction? So what you have here is called the dopamine serotonin U-curve. So this shows the production of dopamine when you're engaged. So first, if you're engaged in a regular activity, imagine you're going for a swim, going for a jog, or chatting with your friends, there is a certain level of dopamine that is going to be increased. And the simple way to see this is if you're enjoying that activity, that means there's dopamine involved. After about 25 minutes of dopamine increasing in your system, there is a natural reduction of dopamine. So what happens here is this is the normal healthy dopamine. This is the DA type 1 dopamine. This is the non-addictive dopamine. After about 25 minutes, it gradually starts to reduce. This is when you're involved with healthy analog activities, normal activities. And after that 45-minute time, serotonin starts to increase. Serotonin naturally starts to increase and tells you, hey, you know what, that's enough. You can relax now. You have reached the amount you need. You're satisfied. You can stop doing this activity. This is the healthy process. This is the normal process during analog activities, normal, physical, natural activities. Now let's look at digital activities. When you are engaged with digital activities, a different type of dopamine is produced. It's called the DA type 2 dopamine. It's the addictive type of dopamine. And this starts to kick in after that 35-minute point while we're engaged in digital activity. So when this type of dopamine is produced, it starts to increase, and the brain notices that, okay, this is a different type of chemical. I think I need to block this. So a little barrier forms in the nucleus accumbens. This is the part of the brain that receives this dopamine chemical, and it blocks this. And then what happens is the brain also notices, hey, no, but I don't want to block this. I'm enjoying this activity. I need to produce more. So more of the DA2 type dopamine is increased. And then the barrier increases more. And you see where this is going. The more of the barrier that is increased, this is called tolerance. The more of the barrier that is increased, the more of the DA type 2 dopamine increases as well. And these are called reward spikes, because your brain keeps telling itself, hey, look, this feels good. I don't want to stop. But the other part of the brain says, no, look, this is enough. So there's this battle going on in your brain of trying to reward itself and trying to protect itself. This is called tolerance. Any person who's addicted understands what tolerance is. This is when you need more and more of it to feel good. It's the same situation when it comes to chemical substances. After a while of taking alcohol or drugs or cigarettes or whatever it may be, you need more of it just to feel good. This is called tolerance. So this is the danger when you're engaged with too much digital screen activity. You start to build tolerance and you start to produce too much DA type 2 dopamine, and of course, no serotonin is produced. Serotonin is not in your system, so there's nothing in your body that says you have reached a satisfaction point, this is enough. So that's how the dopamine use serotonin curve works. I'd like to show a little clip by a digital researcher, neuroscience digital researcher called Brad Huddleston on this same topic.
So before we go anywhere else, I do want to introduce you properly, Brad. You're a researcher in neuroscience. You're an international speaker. You work closely, I believe, with law enforcement as well as a board in South Africa. You had a couple of TV spots on morning shows, which I've seen. You've been on plenty of radio shows, and you're a podcaster as well. You are the reputed author of 3 books.
Shot of that. That's what the cover looks like.
What we're talking about is the term digital addiction. And the title of the book, obviously, is one of the most provocative titles out there, digital cocaine. What is digital cocaine?
The best way I can describe digital cocaine to you is show you some brain scans, because that's where I named the book. You can actually see addiction on brain scans. And this particular technology is called SPECT, and it stands for single photon emission computed tomography. It's just a measure of the activity or the lack thereof. And that is a baseline of a brain scan of someone who's normal. The neurons are firing, everything's well. And then you can put somebody's in the scanner who you suspect has a brain deficiency or damage. And then what you do is you scan it and you measure the deviation, and you can see what the damage is. So here's one of someone who smokes marijuana. And so clearly it affects you. Now, this is what was upsetting to people. People don't like to look inside. They like to think that things are not hurting them. And then people like me come along, and this is the ministry side of me, Dimitri, just to be perfectly honest with you. I actually care for people. The thought of people harming themselves bothers me, and it makes me want to reach out and say, hey, look, this has gone too far. But let me show you digital addiction. So the next scan is someone who snorts cocaine, actually the real powder cocaine. You see those holes there. The neurons are shutting, or the brain is shutting down, and the neurons aren't firing properly. And so it starts to affect their personality. And other brain imaging shows that video game addicts look very similar to that one in particular. And so the meth brain looks very similar. And then we'll come back to the baseline, and that drug that you see there in the middle, heroin, came in through a needle. But the third one is digital addiction, and that is pornography addiction. And that drug came in through the eyes from a screen, and the brain responded. And it damages, of course. So when we talk about digital cocaine, when you compare the brain scans of people who actually snort cocaine and you compare that with someone who's digitally addicted, the brain scans are nearly identical to either heroin or cocaine. So I named the book Digital Cocaine based on science, not trying to upset anyone, but it's alarming. And, you know, we're giving the equivalent dopaminergically of cocaine to children. They're being babysat with that. And so
these are the dopamine hits that we're talking about, right?
Large dopamine hits, and a child's brain can't handle it. So when you take the device away from them, they have withdrawals, and it manifests itself in the form of extreme anger and fits. And so if you were to scan their brain, you would see horrific things.
Yeah, I hope that video was helpful, and I hope everyone heard what that researcher was talking about. So what he was saying is, irrelevant of what content is on the screen, if you're engaging with it in an intense way, whether it's video games, whether he mentioned pornography, social media, it can have harmful effects on your brain. And I don't know how many people saw those brain scans. There was a lot of harm done to the digitally affected brain, similar to the brain that has been affected by cocaine. So there's a lot of breakthrough research happening in that area. So let's look at some of the direct effects due to the digital impact. So the common aspect is there's a loss of interest in real life activities, that you would normally enjoy with your friends, or things you normally used to do would naturally reduce. These are the symptoms of someone who is digitally affected. Escapism, a person who engages with the digital aspects, whether it's social media or movies or gaming or pornography, they want to escape the real world. So there's an increase in the amount of time they spend online. They become less social. Their social skills drop. They're less interested in social activities. They start to have more sleep issues. Sleep is very It's very low-level sleep. You don't have deep sleep. You wake up still not feeling fully rested. And then, of course, there's many indirect effects. There's an aspect called anhedonia. This is a scientific term. Anhedonia is the feeling that you feel bored no matter how much of digital entertainment you're involved in. You don't enjoy natural activities. You do no longer find excitement doing normal physical things that you used to enjoy. That feeling of being bored with the real life activities is called anhedonia. Increase of social anxiety. Your fear of dealing with people, your fear of disappointing people, your fear of rejection with people, you're worrying about how will people think of me, how I say something, how will they receive me, increases with the more intensity of digital intake. Increase of depression. Don't feel like going out, you feel more low mood. The common symptoms of depression. Instant gratification. There's a lack of impatience. There's a lack of patience, sorry. There's a lack of patience with people who are highly digitally addicted. And that patience could be for normal physical things such as food or other pleasurable activities, or even in a conversation. You have less patience listening to somebody. So you want instant gratification. You want to feel good immediately. Low empathy. You have less understanding of what another person may be going through. You have less empathy towards that person. You feel less interest towards what that person may be going through, no matter who you're engaging. It's also called low EQ, low emotional intelligence. And of course, if you're in a sexual relationship, you will, depending on the amount of digital addiction you have, sexual issues will increase. You may tend to have sexual relation issues in your relationship. Digital dementia, you start to forget aspects of your daily life. You start to forget things more often that you normally wouldn't in the past. This starts to become an issue. FOMO, fear of missing out. These are probably terms everyone knows. Your fear of missing out on social media starts to increase. You want to always stay connected simply because you don't want to miss out on what your friends are up to or what is trending. Nomophobia. This is the fear of, it's also called the phone separation anxiety. Simple example would be how worried do you get when you forget your phone when you are on your way to work? I mean, we all have that tendency for some in many instances, but this is a next level where you can't feel separated from your phone at any point in the day. It's more extreme. The good news, now let's come to the good news. I've shared a lot of bad news, I've shared a lot of dangers, but there is good news. Digital detoxing is available. This is, research has shown, most of the neuroscience researchers have shown that most of these are reversible in adults. Even in younger children, these are reversible, but the processes are a little different. But in adults, mostly they are reversible. The first tip is reduce screen time. This is the obvious one. We need to reduce the amount of screen time that we are engaged in. These are going to be struggles, especially for most of you all here who are involved with screen-related work. This is a challenge for me as well. So once again, just to be very clear, I'm not preaching to you about what you shouldn't be doing, what you should be doing. This is simply the facts, the information, and it is going to be a challenge for you as it is for me as well. No screen time before bedtime. The reason for this is a very technical reason. We have a neurotransmitter called melatonin. Melatonin is what gives you restful sleep. Increase of DA type 2 dopamine destroys the production of melatonin. So what does that mean? If you are engaged with heavy digital activity just before bedtime, you won't have the melatonin, which helps you to fall asleep. So what that means is you will fall asleep because you're tired, but you're not going to get restful sleep. This is a challenge for me personally, because most of us, what do we do before we go to bed? We will watch something on YouTube, we'll watch something on on our streaming devices, and that's when we go to bed. So this is a challenge for all of us, but the scientific facts are quite clear. We need roughly 7 to 8 hours of sleep. This is the amount of time that we need to increase our serotonin, then to reduce dopamine, and to manage our melatonin. So this is purely a scientific aspect of how we need to detox these neurotransmitters in our bodies. Analog activities, the physical activities that you used to enjoy doing, will help you to increase the healthy dopamine, the DA type 1 dopamine in your body. And how do you engage with that? Natural thrills. Natural thrills, the thrill you may feel from jumping from a springboard in a swimming pool, the thrill you feel as a child swinging on a swing. Those are the natural thrills. So doing more physical activities, natural thrills, healthy natural thrills, will increase the healthy levels of dopamine. And that is also a manner of detoxing. And yes, this is going to sound like I'm a parent telling the kids to eat your vegetables. And it turns out that our parents, whether they knew it or not, had some valuable advice. Eat crunchy vegetables and fruits. And the scientific reason for that is it increases serotonin production. And what do we know about serotonin? It helps to make us feel complete, helps to make us feel satisfied and peaceful, and it helps combat the DA type 2 dopamine. So yeah, these are some of the basics. There's more tips, but these are the basic ideas of how to detox from digital addiction. And oh yes, there is an aspect of touching rough surfaces. So these are tips where you can use choir mats, or even choir products in your hands. It could be more rough surface, crunchy rough surface stress balls, stress relievers, which are more rough. Those also trigger serotonin production. So these are just some of the tips. There's way more that are available online, but these are just a few ideas to give you to help you with your digital detoxing. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. If you have more questions, feel free to reach out to me. My information is on the screen. And I look forward for the Q&A section to answer more questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Usha, and thank you, Dimitri. That was wonderful. And thank you all for joining. And I hope that this has helped you. Please share whatever you have learned. And Sandra, over to you for the closing remarks.
There is one question, actually.
Sure.
What is the recommended screen time per day?
Dimitri, would like to take that?
Yeah, that's a tough question, but thanks for asking that. It depends from person to person, but let me put it this way. The healthy thing to do is a couple of hours before sleep time, it would be best to get off screens. That would be the best, because it would be hard to put the number of hours to limit to ourselves, especially if we are working on screens. So I don't want to say this number of hours is best. But at least 1 or 2 hours before sleep to get off screens would probably be the best way to monitor. So,
right. Thank you very much, Dimitri and Dr. Usha, for your very valuable insights. I think all of us who were part of this session gained a lot of knowledge on how we can enhance our overall well-being. So that brings us to the end of today's session. Thank you very much for everyone's participation, and have yourselves a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Dr. Usha. Thanks, Dimitri. Thank you. Nice meeting you all.
Likewise, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure meeting you all. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much.